It seems that Mega Voltage really has a knack for defying expectations. Episode 94, like episode 92, ended up being so much better than expected. We went into this episode expecting two things: the return of Mollie and another raid-like battle against a Laquium-afflicted Pokémon, this time a Vileplume. This is exactly what we got, of course, but with a few unexpected twists. Yes, Mollie returned, but only for this episode because she also left again, since she chose not to travel with Liko and Roy even though they invited her to, choosing instead to remain at her family's Pokémon Center. I don't know about you, but I expected her to join Liko and Roy on their journey, especially given that their goal is to restore the rising bolt tacklers. Something that definitely concerns Mollie and something she would support. In fact, she fully endorses Liko and Friends' mission, though she did have some reservations initially. More on this later. However, much to my shock, she rejected their invite. Initial shock, that is, since I soon understood that this is not surprising given that in previous series, Ash ran into former traveling companions several times, and most of the time, they ended up not traveling with him again, opting instead to continue their journey. And even if they did, it wouldn't be for very long. This actually made a lot of sense since most of the time Ash already had a new group that usually had no history with the returning character. So adding said character to the current group for more than just 1 or 2 episodes would likely disrupt the dynamic of the active cast. Moreover, this would be difficult and taxing on the writers and animators since they would have to find ways to make a big group work to give them all time to shine and to draw and animate so many characters at once, respectively. It's certainly much more manageable to have a main cast composed of only 2 or 3 characters, 4 at most. With Liko, Roy, and Mollie, the former is not applicable since they were traveling companions until just a few episodes ago, so they still very much know and are compatible with each other. The dynamic between them is intact, so it wouldn't be jarring for them to travel together again. The latter, however, is a problem for them. If Mollie rejoined them, then Orla, Mordog, Ludlow, and Freed, whenever they find them, would have to rejoin them too. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fair. Throw in Dot if and when she decides to travel with Liko and Roy in person, and Uruto if he ends up joining them as an official traveling companion, and you have a grand total of 9 characters, not counting their Pokémon. It would be insane to have them all traveling together for several episodes. I would argue it might be impossible to do this. It would be one thing if they still had the Brave Olivine, which makes traveling convenient for so many characters and allows the writers and animators to cheat having to juggle so many characters. So I understand why Mollie was not allowed to rejoin Liko and Roy from a writing and animation standpoint, and from a narrative standpoint. It's clear that her time at the Pokémon Center has been valuable, and she likely feels that there is still much more she can learn and do. So she chooses to stay to continue improving and doing what she loves. Plus, her presence would lessen the impact of this arc being Liko and Friends' personal quest, of them independently working towards a goal they are invested in and find worthwhile. However, understanding why Mollie had to stay behind doesn't mean I have to like it. But hey, it's not like we won't see her again. She did say that if Liko and Friends succeed and the Rising Bolt Tacklers can reform complete with their airship, she will be more than happy to accept their invite then. Also, I think it's safe to say that Orla and the others will all return at some point in much the same way Mollie did here. Additionally, I love that Maushold chose to accompany and assist Mollie in this new chapter of her life, which is adorable and fitting given that she was integral to the episode where Maushold was introduced and joined the Rising Bull Tacklers. Now, speaking of the Rising Bull Tacklers reforming, we already knew going into this episode that they disbanded following the fall of Laqua and the Freed's apparent demise. However, we didn't get any specifics about how or why it happened, nor did we actually get to see it happening. Well, this episode finally provided us with a flashback of this pivotal moment. Turns out that the adults were the ones who chose to disband, and they did so unilaterally for the sake of Liko, Roy, and Dot without asking for their opinion. This partly explains why Liko was so depressed back in episodes 90 and 91. She did not leave behind the place she called home and the people she cares about so much out of her own volition. Instead, she was essentially forced to do this. Even if it was out of concern for her, this doesn't change the fact that she had to accept such a painful separation without a say in the matter, which is something that would leave anyone down in the dumps. Moreover, it's clear that the decision to disband took a toll on Murdoch and the others. It's obvious that they did not want to resort to such a drastic measure, but seeing as their objectives of gathering the heroes, reaching Laqua, and vanquishing the Laquium were all completed, and with Freed, their leader, gone, and the airship in shambles, they probably simply had no idea of what to do going forward. So they figured that disbanding was the only way to force Liko and friends to move on with their lives. After all, they are young. They still have so much they need to see, do, experience, learn, etc., that it would be an incredible shame for them to waste their youth and their precious time trying to keep a sinking ship without a captain and with no heading afloat. This unexpected flashback doesn't just elevate this episode, allowing it to be so much more powerful, valuable, and significant, but it also makes a decision, a turn of events that seemed so drastic, unreasonable, and questionable suddenly feel much more understandable. Even if still heartbreaking, it reframes the disbanding not as an act of giving up, but as a sacrifice, a painful choice made out of love and concern for the younger generation's future. It also explains why Mollie was initially reluctant to agree with Liko and Friends' decision to maintain and restore the name of the Rising Bull Tacklers. It goes against the reason they disbanded. Liko and friends are still chained to the Rising Bull Tacklers instead of finding something else they want to be and do. By showing us the weight of that excruciating decision and the emotions behind it, this episode manages to deepen our empathy for all involved and retroactively enriches both the emotional fallout we saw in earlier episodes and the narrative thus far. Brilliant storytelling as is usual for this series. The final twist that allowed this episode to exceed expectations is that it surprisingly turned out to be a Hatrem episode. During the battle with Vileplume, she took center stage as opposed to the supporting role she usually has even as recently as the Double Steelix battle from episode 92. Not only did she end up becoming Liko's main battling Pokemon for this battle, but she also learned a new move and she even got to Terastalize. Simply wonderful. Hatrem finally got another chance to shine and to do so quite brightly and in a special way, which is absolutely fantastic. Liko relying on her over Meowscarada is strategically the right call, since Hatrem has the type advantage over Poison, while Meowscarada is not only weak to it, but also Poison has a resistance to Grass, with Vileplume having a double resistance to Grass on account of it also being a Grass type. This is one of the few times where using Hatrem in place of Meowscarada makes perfect sense, something that only elevates what was an already delightful, welcomed, and unexpected departure from the norm, since it feels completely earned, both narratively and tactically. This wasn't just a random spotlight, it was smart and character-driven. While perhaps it would have been cooler for her to learn another offensive move, namely an upgrade to Confusion like Psychic, her learning Healing Wish, another healing move, is without a doubt the better outcome because it suits both her and this episode beautifully. It suits her because, again, she almost always ends up playing a supporting role. Specifically, she's a healer. So Healing Wish, a support move that heals, fits her perfectly, and it suits this episode because the episode I alluded to earlier, the one where Maushold made its debut, episode 38, also happens to be the episode where Hatrem learned Heal Pulse, which is why she became a healer like Mollie, who again was integral to that episode, and her Chansey, who Hatrem learned Heal Pulse from. Hatrem improving her healing capabilities in an episode where Mollie, Chansey, and Maushold return is simply perfect, especially since Chansey helps Hatrem heal Vileplume, and this episode also shows that Mollie has been doing her best at her family's Pokémon Center, even working overtime by tending to wild Pokémon on her own time. Something that emphasizes the value of healing and the selflessness and kind heart it demands, which are exemplified best by Hatrem, who noticed that Vileplume was suffering and chose to stop battling in order to heal it instead, which is what ultimately leads to her learning Healing Wish, meaning she both earned and deserved this accomplishment. It's a fitting reward for her unwavering compassion, boundless empathy, and instinct to nurture even in the heat of battle. Traits that make her the ideal, quintessential healer. And what better episode to prove this than this one? Seeing Mollie like this also has the added effect of making me like her even more and reinforcing how committed she is to helping Pokémon in need. Unfortunately though, we don't learn much about her past or family. We do, however, get to meet her mother, who is essentially an older version of Nurse Joy, confirming my suspicion that Mollie is related to the iconic matron of Pokémon centers worldwide. Hatrem getting to Terastalize is significant and amazing because not only is this the first time she Terastalizes, but this is also the first time that Liko, Roy, or Dot use Terastal on a Pokemon other than their starter. Plus, Hatrem is also the first, and as of this episode only, second Pokemon that gets to Terastalize. It's about time. I've always advocated for the second Pokemon to get more time in the spotlight and to shine. However, Horizons has done a poor job on this front for the most part. Kilowattrel, Hattrem, and Tinkatuff rarely get the screen time they deserve, but when they do, it's almost always great. I think Mega Voltage has been an improvement in this department thus far, this episode being the perfect example. It gives me hope that Kilowattrel and the Tinkatuff will soon also get their moment and a chance to Terastalize. Finally, I of course cannot review an episode that features a battle without providing my thoughts on said battle. While it wasn't anything breathtaking, the battle against the Vileplume was pretty good and entertaining nonetheless, not to mention tense. Its poison was masterfully portrayed as being overwhelmingly powerful and menacing, to the point that Liko and Roy were forced to switch Pokémon, smartly choosing instead to use Pokémon with a type advantage over and an immunity to poison respectively, just to ensure that they could contend with Vileplume. Its poison was so potent that Kilowattrel, speaking of more second Pokemon screen time, Maushold, adorably with leaves, and Cap with Rising Bolt Tackle all had to step in to repel it. So yeah, not the most exciting battle, but still a thoroughly engaging and enjoyable one. Plus, Hatrem and everything she got to do in it certainly made it more compelling, thrilling, and meaningful. Also, no Uruto this episode, and he wasn't really missed, reinforcing how inconsequential he has been thus far. So overall, this episode was awesome, packed with emotion, surprises, smart writing, and well-earned character growth, from Mollie's return and her heartfelt and shocking decision to stay behind, to Hatrem's long overdue and deserved spotlight, which was oh so special. Episode 94 delivered far more than expected. Throw in the fact that it also raised the emotional stakes of the story and provided us with a pretty entertaining battle, and you get an episode that exemplifies why I think Mega Voltage is proving to be adept at quietly defying expectations in the best ways possible. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, feel free to click the links on screen. And if you'd like to support the channel and help me keep making content like this, you can find ways to do so in the description below. Your support truly means the world to me. Thank you so much for watching, and let's meet again in the next video.